My child, I see you. I see you sitting there carrying a weight that was never meant for your shoulders. I watch you as the day ends, when the noise of the world finally fades, and that heavy sigh escapes your lips. It is a sigh born of deep exhaustion and quiet desperation. You are running on an endless treadmill of responsibilities, trying to hold your entire world together entirely alone. You wake up before the sun, already calculating the demands of the day, organizing the chaos, and bracing yourself for the endless list of tasks that never seems to shrink. You have convinced yourself that if you just work a little harder, if you just run a little faster, you will finally reach a place of rest. But that rest never comes. Instead, you are caught in a cycle of survival, completely drained, yet feeling guilty if you ever stop moving. I want you to know right now that I am not angry with you. I am not disappointed in you. But my heart aches as I watch you live this way. I see the frantic, exhausting attempts to manage everything in your own finite strength. You have built a fortress of busyness around yourself, believing that constant motion is the only way to keep everything from falling apart. You carry the financial worries, the family conflicts, the silent fears about the future, and the heavy expectations of everyone around you. You try to be strong for everyone else. You dry their tears, you solve their problems, and you offer them the comfort that you so desperately need yourself. But when the house is quiet and you are finally alone, the loneliness sets in. You feel entirely isolated in your struggles, trapped in a self-inflicted burnout that is slowly consuming your spirit. I have been right here beside you through every single moment of this chaotic journey. I have never left you, yet I patiently watch as you push away my gentle whispers. You do not ignore me out of malice. You ignore me because you falsely believe you are simply too busy to stop and rest. You think to yourself that you will pray tomorrow. You promise yourself that when the schedule clears, when the bills are paid, then you will finally sit down and spend time with me. But tomorrow brings another crisis, another mountain to climb. And so my presence becomes just another item on your endless to-do list, pushed to the bottom, because you feel you must survive the day first. You have convinced yourself that stopping to listen to me is a luxury you cannot afford right now. Oh, my precious child, if you only knew how much I long to carry this mountain of weight for you. This relentless, noisy pace is doing more than just destroying your mental peace. It is actively distancing you from your only true source of comfort. By trying to control every outcome in your own strength, you are unknowingly pushing me away. You are silently creating an aching separation between us. You feel this distance deeply. It is that quiet ache in your chest, that lingering sense of emptiness that nothing in this world seems to fill. You wonder why your prayers feel like they are hitting the ceiling, and why the joy you once knew has been replaced by a hollow sense of duty. The truth is, your frantic pace has built a massive wall between your heart and mine. You were never designed to operate at this speed. I did not create you to be a machine of endless productivity, measuring your worth by how much you can accomplish before the sun goes down. I created you for relationship. I created you to walk with me in the cool of the day, sharing your burdens and finding your rest in my unwavering love. But right now, you are acting like an orphan who has to fend for themselves in a harsh and unforgiving world. You are a child of the Most High, yet you are living as if you have no father to provide for you. This beautiful life I have given you has devolved into a mere coping mechanism, an exhausting marathon where you are just trying to cross the finish line of each day without completely falling apart. I know exactly what you are afraid of. I know that beneath the busyness is a profound fear that if you actually stop, everything will shatter. You believe your constant striving is the glue holding your life together. You are terrified that if you let go of the control wheel for a second, the whole vehicle will crash. So you grip the wheel tighter, your spirit completely depleted. I see the tears you hold back when someone asks how you are doing, and you force a smile and say, "You are fine." You are not fine, my child. You are crumbling under a burden I never asked you to bear. This silent separation from me is the deepest emotional pain you are experiencing, even if you have not had the words to describe it until now. It is a pain that goes far beyond physical tiredness. It is the exhaustion of trying to be your own provider and your own source of peace. When you wake up in the middle of the night, your mind racing with anxious thoughts and worst-case scenarios. That is the fruit of carrying the world alone. Your frantic living is a loud, chaotic noise that is drowning out the very solution you are desperately seeking. You are looking for a way out of this heavy state, searching for a breakthrough, a miracle, a moment of relief. Yet you are running past the open door I have set before you. I want to offer you a completely different rhythm, one that is not defined by exhaustion or the constant need to prove your worth. I want to gently dismantle the heavy armor you have put on just to survive the day. You are so deeply loved and perfectly understood in this exact moment. Your burnout is not a sign of weakness. It is a clear signal that your current way of living is completely unsustainable. The quiet desperation you feel right now is actually a beautiful turning point, a holy dissatisfaction designed to bring you safely back into my arms. You do not have to live like this anymore. The endless treadmill can stop today. You do not need to figure out the next 10 steps. You only need to take one small step toward me. I am standing right here, waiting for you to realize that you have reached the end of your own strength. I see the heavy sigh. I feel the ache in your tired bones. I know every silent tear you have cried, trying to wash away the stress of a life that has become entirely unmanageable. You have poured your energy into fixing everything and everyone around you, leaving your own soul entirely empty and parched. I see how you pour from an empty cup, scraping the bottom, just to give a little more to those who need you. In your noble effort to be everything, for everyone, you have forgotten how to be my child. You have forgotten what it feels like to simply sit in my presence, without an agenda, without a list of requests, and without the pressing weight of the clock ticking in the background. I want to replace the heavy, suffocating blanket of burnout with a light, easy yoke that allows your soul to breathe again. But to do this, we must address the real issue. The root of your exhaustion is the spiritual distance that has grown between us. Every time you choose to push through in your own strength, you are choosing to walk further away from the well of living water I offer. The longer you walk in the desert of self-reliance, the more spiritually dehydrated you become. Do you feel that deep, desperate longing inside you right now? That is not just a desire for a vacation or a good night's sleep. That is your spirit crying out for its creator. You are craving a peace that cannot be found in a perfectly organized schedule or the fragile approval of others. You are longing for the unshakable comfort that only comes from knowing you are securely held by the very hands that form the universe. There is a reason you feel this heavy conviction pulling at your heart today. It is because you are finally ready to understand what you have been missing. You are ready to discover how the constant chaotic noise of your daily worries has been actively drowning out the quiet guidance you so desperately need. You have been ignoring something incredibly vital, something so profoundly tender and necessary for your survival. And to begin your true healing, you must first recognize the exact nature of the gentle voice you have been constantly pushing away. The voice you have been pushing away is not loud. It does not crash through the ceiling of your home or echo like thunder to shake you awake from your exhausted slumber. It is a still, small voice. I speak to you in a gentle whisper, waiting patiently for the exact moment you finally stop moving. But stopping is the one thing you feel you absolutely cannot do. Your days are completely consumed by a relentless, blinding noise. From the very second your alarm pulls you from a restless, fragmented sleep, the volume of your life is immediately turned all the way up. The urgent demands of your family calling your name, the heavy pressure of your financial obligations looming over you, the constant flood of incoming messages demanding immediate answers, and the silent, swirling anxieties racing through your own mind create a deafening roar. You are living inside a massive, violent storm of your own making, frantically trying to navigate the wind and the crashing waves, desperately hoping to just make it to the shore of tomorrow without drowning. You believe this noise is the undeniable soundtrack of a responsible life, but it is actually the sound of a spirit slowly running out of air. In the middle of this chaotic storm, you often ask me to intervene. You cry out in the dark for a massive, undeniable sign. You want me to step into your chaos with a sweeping gust of wind to instantly blow away your towering obstacles. You want a sudden, earth-shattering quake to violently shatter the incredibly heavy barriers standing in your way, or a blinding fire from heaven to completely burn up your endless problems. You look for me in the spectacular and the dramatic, desperate for a loud, booming rescue that requires absolutely no effort, no vulnerability, and no pause on your part. You have mistakenly convinced yourself that because your worldly problems are so incredibly loud, your God must be even louder to defeat them. But I do not shout over the chaos you have built. I do not aggressively compete with the frantic noise of your distracted living. Long ago, I stood on a mountain while a fierce, terrifying wind tore the rocks apart. An earthquake violently shook the ground, and a raging fire blazed across the sky. But I was not in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. I was in the gentle, quiet whisper that followed. And I am in that exact same gentle whisper right now. My voice is the soft breeze you ignore when you rush from your car to your front door. It is the sudden quiet urge to simply close your eyes and breathe deeply before answering a frustrating question. I am calling your name, waiting patiently for you to quiet your turbulent spirit just enough to hear me. You miss this whisper entirely, not because you are hard-hearted, and certainly not because you do not care about my presence, but because your anxious mind is completely and utterly preoccupied with mere survival. Your profound spiritual distraction has become a thick, heavy blanket, constantly muffling the sound of my grace. You see, the enemy of your peace does not actually need to destroy your faith to render you exhausted. He only needs to distract you from it. If he can manage to keep your daily calendar completely full, your hands endlessly busy, and your weary mind continuously racing with 1,000 different disastrous scenarios, you will never have the quiet space required to hear my guiding voice. He thrives in your constant motion because he knows that stillness is where you regain your spiritual strength. And so you just keep running. You instinctively fill every single silent moment with some form of activity, a glowing screen, a background noise, or another mindless chore. You are completely terrified of the silence because genuine silence inevitably forces you to face the deep emptiness and the profound spiritual exhaustion you have been trying so desperately to outrun. The very moment things get truly quiet in your house, your buried worries and deep-seated fears immediately rush to the surface of your mind. So to cope with that discomfort, you quickly turn the noise back on. You have unknowingly conditioned yourself to run away from the very stillness where I am waiting to heal your broken edges. Because of this constant frantic motion, the beautiful thought of spending time with me has become incredibly twisted in your weary mind. You no longer look at prayer as a safe, restful sanctuary, but rather as another heavy obligation added to an already breaking back. Quiet time with me has tragically devolved into just another stressful item on your endless survival checklist. You look at your tightly packed, exhausting schedule, realize that you have not prayed today, and an immediate heavy wave of guilt washes over your chest. You quietly tell yourself that you are failing as a believer, that your faith is undeniably weak, and that I am surely disappointed in your glaring lack of spiritual discipline. You assume I am standing over you with a clipboard, keeping a strict record of all the moments you failed to sit quietly. When you do try to connect, it is rarely in stillness. You try to force a quick, hurried prayer while driving through heavy traffic, your hands gripping the steering wheel tight, or while washing the evening dishes, staring blankly out the window. You rattle off a long, frantic list of desperate requests, asking me to immediately fix the finances, heal the broken relationships, and somehow make the suffocating stress disappear. Then right after speaking your anxieties into the air, you rush headfirst into the next demanding task. You never stay long enough to hear my answer. You are treating me like an emergency crisis hotline, rather than your intimately loving father. The profound tragedy of this dynamic is that the very relationship divinely meant to offer you the ultimate unshakable rest has somehow become a source of profound spiritual fatigue. You are working so hard to reach me, completely forgetting that I am already standing right beside you. Please listen to me very carefully right now, my precious child. I am bringing this profound distraction to your attention, not to condemn you. There is absolutely no anger, frustration, or disappointment in my voice as I speak these loving words to your spirit. I am not pointing out your frantic busyness to make you feel worse about the way you are desperately trying to survive. I see the pure, incredibly tired intention of your heart. I know with absolute certainty that your ongoing habit of ignoring my whispers is not born out of malice or a rebellious desire to walk away from me. It is born entirely out of fear. It is deeply rooted in an anxious, highly ingrained reliance on yourself. You have been severely disappointed by life so many times before. You have watched carefully laid plans fall apart before your very eyes. You have seen doors unjustly slammed shut. And you have experienced the sharp, lingering pain of people walking away when you needed them most. In the midst of that lingering pain, you silently made a vow to yourself. You decided that the only possible way to protect yourself and the people you love is to fiercely control every single detail of your environment. You honestly believe that if you stop working, if you stop worrying, if you take even 10 minutes to sit quietly and vulnerably in my presence, the fragile, chaotic world you are single-handedly holding together will shatter into a million irreparable pieces. You run from the quiet because you are absolutely terrified of what will happen if you finally stand still and trust someone else to carry the load. You have convinced yourself that your anxiety is the only thing keeping your life intact. Look at the stark, glaring contrast between your loud, frantic world and my peaceful presence. Your world is incredibly demanding, highly unpredictable, and completely exhausting. It constantly takes from you until you have nothing left to give. My whisper, however, is deeply peaceful, eternally unwavering, gentle, and overflowing with sustaining grace. You are constantly striving for a sense of security that your own two hands can never fully build. Every single time you choose to push through the fatigue in your own finite strength, every time you actively ignore that quiet, gentle prompting in your spirit to sit down and rest, you are reinforcing a massive spiritual barrier between us. This busyness is not just a harmless scheduling problem or a temporary season of life. It is a profound spiritual wall that actively prevents my divine peace from flowing into your current circumstances. You are spiritually starving for a sense of comfort, yet you are running past the open banquet table I have prepared for you every single day. Your frantic reliance on your own limited understanding is actively delaying the true lasting healing you have been crying out for in your darkest, loneliest moments. It is keeping you locked inside a dark prison of anxiety when the iron door has already been blown wide open by my grace. Your distracted living has created a massive chasm, and you are feeling the cold wind of that separation every day. But there is something even deeper, something far more personal that you must understand about this widening distance between us. Your constant running is doing much more than just harming your own peace of mind and delaying your breakthrough. It is touching something far more sacred. To truly comprehend the gravity of this beautiful journey we are on, you need to understand exactly how your self-reliant distance deeply affects the heart of the one who loves you more than life itself. I watch you pull away, and it is not anger that fills my spirit. It is a profound, aching sorrow. For so long, you have been taught to view me through the lens of human expectations and worldly authority. You have pictured me as a rigid, distant taskmaster, sitting on a throne, far away, arms strictly crossed, demanding your absolute perfection, and keeping a cold, calculated ledger of your daily failures. You believe that when you stumble, when you lose your patience with your family, or when you let the chaotic busyness of the week completely crowd out your prayer time, My reaction is one of harsh, unforgiving disappointment. You think I am looking down at you, with a heavy sigh of frustration, ready to withdraw my blessings, because you simply did not perform well enough today. But this is a tragically distorted, deeply broken image of who I am. I am not a demanding boss, waiting to punish you for poor performance. I am your deeply vulnerable, infinitely loving Father. My love for you is not transactional. It is not based on how many boxes you check on your spiritual to-do list, or how perfectly you manage your stressful schedule. My love is an unwavering, fiercely protective covenant. And because of the depth of this love, I am capable of feeling immense, piercing pain when you turn your back on me. When my word speaks of not grieving the Holy Spirit, it is revealing a breathtaking, intimately tender truth. I have intentionally made myself vulnerable to you. The Holy Spirit residing within your heart is not some unfeeling cosmic force or a distant abstract theological concept. The Spirit is a living, breathing presence of divine love, completely capable of profound joy, but equally capable of being deeply grieved. To grieve someone, you must first love them deeply. You cannot grieve the heart of a stranger, but you can certainly break the heart of someone who loves you completely. When you deliberately choose to wrap yourself in anxiety, when you isolate your heart, and when you rely entirely on your own failing strength over my eagerly outstretched hand, it does not offend my pride. It actively, physically wounds my heart. It is a deeply personal rejection. Every single morning when you wake up and instantly strap on your incredibly heavy armor of self-reliance, effectively telling me, through your actions, that you do not need my help to survive the day you are pushing away the greatest, most sustaining love you will ever know. Your silent separation is not merely a broken religious rule or a failure to maintain a habit. It is a fracture in our intimate relationship. Imagine for a moment a loving parent watching their precious child struggle to carry a massive, suffocating physical burden. The child's hands are bleeding, their knees are buckling, and tears of sheer exhaustion are streaming down their face. The parent is standing right there, arms wide open, repeatedly begging the child to hand over the heavy load. But the child stubbornly looks away, gripping the crushing weight even tighter, convinced that they must carry it alone to prove their worth or to somehow keep themselves safe. Can you imagine the sheer agony in that parent's chest? Can you feel the desperate, piercing desire to simply step in and absorb the pain? That is exactly how it feels for me to watch you live your life right now. It is incredibly painful for me to watch my precious child suffer so unnecessarily. When you sit alone at the kitchen table late at night, staring blankly at the unpaid bills, whispering a quiet, desperate prayer, while wondering if tomorrow will finally bring any hope, I am sitting right there beside you. When your hands tremble as you reach for the doorknob, wondering what heavy expectations and intense conflicts wait for you on the other side of the room, I feel that exact same fear washing over your spirit. I see every hidden tear. I know about the profound loneliness that grips you, even when you are standing in a crowded room. The tragedy of your current exhaustion is that I have already provided all the grace, all the provision, and all the profound peace you could ever possibly need. The banquet table is fully set, the water is already poured, and the heavy door to true rest is standing wide open. Yet you choose to remain outside in the cold, desperately scavenging for crumbs of comfort, in a world that will never genuinely satisfy your soul. You are starving yourself of my presence, not because I have locked you out, but because you refuse to drop the heavy burdens in your hands long enough to walk through the door. Please, my child, I whisper to your spirit, please don't hurt me by walking away from the only place you are truly safe. When you ignore my gentle prompts, you are essentially telling me that my grace is not sufficient for your current crisis. You are silently declaring that your endless worrying is somehow more effective than my divine sovereignty. And every time you make that choice, a small, painful distance grows between us. It is a distance constructed entirely of your own unnecessary suffering. I do not want you to feel condemned by this truth. Condemnation is a heavy, suffocating chain, and I am here to completely break your chains, not add to them. I want this profound realization to pierce your heart with a tender, awakening light. I want you to finally see that your relentless busyness is not a badge of honor, nor is it a requirement for your survival. It is an active wall of defense that is deeply wounding the God who formed you in the womb. I want you to feel the incredible relational weight of our connection. You matter to me. Your daily peace of mind matters to me. Your emotional rest matters to me far more than your daily productivity. For years, you have viewed your spirituality as a fragile obligation, something you must constantly maintain through sheer willpower. But true faith is simply allowing yourself to be fiercely loved. It is the brave, quiet act of admitting that you are entirely broken without me. It hurts me to see you so profoundly broken, desperately trying to glue your own shattered pieces back together with the cheap temporary adhesives of worldly distraction, frantic scheduling, and emotional numbness. I am the master potter. I am the only one who can put you back together in a way that makes you infinitely stronger and more beautifully whole than you were before the breaking happened. You must begin to ask yourself why you are so fiercely committed to this painful, exhausting way of living. Why do you consistently push my hand away when I reach into the chaotic, turbulent waters to pull you into the boat? The answer lies hidden beneath the surface of your daily routine. It is deeply buried in the quiet, terrified corners of your mind that you actively avoid acknowledging. You are holding on to this massive, crushing burden because in a strange, twisted way, the heavy weight has become incredibly familiar to you. You have carried the heavy burden of survival for so long that you genuinely do not know who you are without it. You are terrified of the empty space that would suddenly exist if you actually handed your worries over to me. If you are not the one constantly managing the crisis, constantly worrying about the future, and constantly fixing everyone else's problems, what is your purpose? You have confused your constant frantic striving with your actual identity. You believe that your ability to manage chaos is what makes you valuable to the people around you. So you cling to the noise, you cling to the stress, and you actively resist the profound surrender I am calling you toward. This silent rejection of my love is deeply tied to a massive illusion you have spent years carefully constructing. It is a highly protective wall you built to keep yourself from being hurt, disappointed, or caught off guard by the unpredictable storms of life. You have convinced yourself that as long as you are the one holding the reins, as long as you are the one agonizing over the details and anticipating every possible disaster, you are somehow safe. But this safety is a complete mirage. It is a fragile house of cards built on the shifting sand of human limitation. To permanently heal the painful distance between us and to finally step into the unshakable, breathtaking peace I have promised you, we must look directly at this mirage. We must gently dismantle the false reality you have created to survive. We must closely examine the heavy, invisible chains of control that are secretly keeping you locked in this state of perpetual burnout. You have spent years mastering the exhausting, relentless art of anticipation. You walk into every room, every meeting, and every family gathering, and your mind instantly begins to meticulously map out every potential problem, every possible conflict, and every conceivable disaster long before it ever happens. You call this constant vigilance, being responsible. You call it being a good provider, being thoroughly prepared, and fiercely protecting the people you love. But I call it what it truly is, a heavy, suffocating, and entirely invisible prison of your own making. You have carefully, painstakingly constructed this towering fortress of self-reliance to shield your fragile heart from the sharp sting of failure and the devastating, painfully familiar ache of disappointment. You genuinely believe that if you just grip the steering wheel of your life a little tighter, if you just plan 3 or 4 steps ahead of everyone else around you, you can somehow force this chaotic, inherently unpredictable world into a perfectly safe, manageable order. You have convinced yourself that anxiety is the required price for safety. But I ask you to look closely at your own hands. Right now, my child. Look at how your knuckles are completely white from gripping your circumstances so fiercely for so many years. Your relentless driving need to manage every single outcome is not actually keeping you safe. It is slowly and methodically suffocating your spirit. You are entirely exhausted because you are desperately trying to do a job that was never assigned to you. You are trying to be the author, the director, the ultimate provider, and the flawless protector of your entire universe, attempting to hold back the violent ocean tides with nothing but your bare hands. It is an impossible task, yet you wake up every single morning and bravely try to do it all over again, silently weeping under the crushing weight of your own impossible expectations. I see the silent, desperate panic that washes over you when an unexpected bill arrives in the mail, when a loved one makes a remarkably poor choice, or when a sudden, unforeseen medical change completely shatters your carefully crafted schedule. In those terrifying moments of worldly uncertainty, your very first instinct is almost never to pause, breathe, and look up to me. Instead, your anxious mind immediately races into a frantic, adrenaline-fueled sprint. You instantly begin calculating exactly how you can fix the problem, how you can cover the looming financial gap, and how you can single-handedly restore the broken balance of your household before anyone else notices you are struggling. This frantic, breathless striving is a profound, deeply ingrained illusion. You cannot control the wind, you cannot control the rain, and you certainly cannot dictate the free will and the complex actions of the people around you. The absolute, undeniable truth that you must finally confront today is that your human strength is painfully finite. There is a very real, definitive limit to how much you can carry, how much you can fix, and how much you can silently endure before your physical body and your emotional mind simply break under the immense, unyielding pressure. You are currently running on the empty fumes of a severely depleted engine, completely terrified that if you admit your profound weakness to me or to others, everything you have worked so incredibly hard to build will instantly collapse into ruin. You are absolutely terrified of failing the people who depend on you, terrified of looking foolish, and terrified of being abandoned. But this desperate, anxious self-reliance is completely unsustainable. It is an incredibly isolating, exhausting way to live. And more importantly, it is actively blocking the very miracles, the breakthroughs, and the deep, abiding peace you are begging me to perform in your life. When you passionately refuse to let go of the problem, your hands remain completely full. And because your hands are fiercely clenched around your circumstances, tightly holding on to your swirling worries and your deep-seated fears, you have absolutely no room left in your spirit to receive the divine grace, the unmerited favor, and the supernatural provision I am constantly trying to hand to you. I cannot step into your specific situation and beautifully untangle the complicated knots of your life if you stubbornly refuse to take your own shaking hands off the ropes. By trying to aggressively micromanage every tiny detail of your future, you are actively preventing my grace from operating freely in your daily routine. You are essentially treating me as an occasional advisor to be consulted only in severe last-minute emergencies, rather than trusting me intimately as your absolute, entirely capable sovereign. You continually ask for my blessing on your own frantic, self-made plans, rather than stopping the endless noise to simply ask what my perfect, peaceful plan is for your life. This exhausting, heartbreaking dynamic must permanently change today. I am gently bringing you to this place of honest, raw vulnerability, not to humiliate you, not to scold you, and certainly not to make you feel like a spiritual failure, but to completely and entirely liberate you from the chains you have wrapped around yourself. You must finally reach the quiet, decisive point where you admit that your current way of operating is simply not working. You must courageously look at the shattered pieces of your own profound exhaustion and boldly realize that you cannot fix this heavy spiritual burden by simply trying harder, sleeping, less worrying, more, or working longer hours. Your own human strength has successfully brought you to the very edge of your breaking point. And now, it is finally time to step aside and let me take over. I want to introduce you to a crucial, life-altering truth that will forever change the way you walk through this chaotic world. True unshakable safety is never found in perfectly organizing your unpredictable circumstances. Genuine security will never ever come from a flawless financial spreadsheet, a perfectly clean house, an airtight daily schedule, or a completely predictable future. The world you currently live in is naturally broken, deeply flawed, and inevitably filled with sudden storms and completely unexpected valleys. If your daily peace of mind is directly anchored to the temporary stability of your external world, you will always be tossed violently back and forth by the heavy crashing waves of anxiety. You will always be one unexpected phone call, one financial mistake, or one sudden crisis away from a complete emotional and physical breakdown. True lasting safety is found only in entirely trusting my perfect, unchanging character. I am the exact same yesterday, today, and forever. When the global economy shifts and your bank account dwindles, my majestic ability to provide for you remains completely constant. When people deeply misunderstand you, betray your trust, or walk away, I stand firmly and loyally by your side, refusing to move. When your health wavers or your emotional energy completely fails, I am your ultimate unwavering healer and your constant sustainer. You must intentionally shift your profound trust entirely away from your own fragile temporary ability to manage your life and place it completely upon my infallible eternal ability to care for you. You are not the master of your fate. You are a deeply cherished, intensely protected child of the Most High God, and you are officially allowed to rest fully in that beautiful identity. Right now, I am gently but firmly challenging your deepest, most ingrained defense mechanisms. I am asking you to do the very thing that terrifies your logical mind the most. I am asking you to completely, unconditionally let go of the steering wheel. I am asking you to stop fighting the raging current, to permanently drop your heavy, exhausting armor of self-reliance, and to finally surrender the painful, agonizing illusion that you are in control. It is a deeply terrifying prospect to step out into the deep, unknown water when you have spent your entire adult life desperately clinging to the shallow, supposedly predictable shore. But out here in the deep, where you cannot touch the bottom, and where you must rely entirely on me to keep you afloat, is exactly where I'm calling you to be. Out here is where true lasting freedom lives. Lasting. You are currently standing at the very edge of absolute breathtaking surrender, trembling slightly with the profound fear of the unknown. But as you stand here in this incredibly sacred, quiet moment, feeling completely exposed, entirely vulnerable, and beautifully stripped of your exhausting illusions, you must finally confront the dark, heavy shadow that has secretly kept you running away from my embrace for all these years. To truly let go, you must look directly at the hidden guilt and the silent, unspoken shame that constantly whispers dark lies to your weary heart, fiercely convincing you that you are entirely unworthy of dropping your heavy burdens at my feet. I know the exact nature of the shame you carry, my child. It is a heavy, suffocating cloak you wear in the quietest moments of your day, woven from the countless times you knew you should have stopped to pray, but kept running instead. You look back at the weeks, the months, and perhaps even the years of this relentless busyness, and a cold, sinking dread settles deep in your chest. You realize how long it has been since you truly rested in my presence, since you spoke to me without rushing, and since you simply sat still enough to feel my love surrounding you. The enemy of your soul has taken that incredibly vulnerable realization and violently twisted it into a profound, paralyzing guilt. He whispers dark, insidious lies in your ear, telling you that you have finally crossed an invisible line that your consistent distraction has permanently disqualified you from my grace, and that you have ignored my gentle voice for far too long to ever be welcomed back. You have genuinely convinced yourself that because you have been distant, I have coldly withdrawn my presence. You believe that if you were to finally turn around and approach me right now, I would meet you with a stern gaze, a crossed pair of arms, and a harsh, deeply disappointed lecture about your glaring lack of spiritual discipline. This profound fear of punishment is the very thing that keeps you running on your exhausting, endless treadmill. It creates a devastating, unbreakable cycle of isolation. You feel entirely too overwhelmed to pray, so you pull away to manage your chaotic life all alone. Then the longer you stay away, the more the heavy guilt compounds, making you absolutely terrified to ever return. You think of me as a rigid, unyielding judge who is silently keeping a meticulous, unforgiving record of every single morning you rushed out the front door without a second thought. Every evening you fell asleep on the couch, too exhausted to whisper a prayer. And every quiet, gentle prompting you actively ignored because you were desperately trying to survive your own schedule. You believe that before I will ever bless you, before I will ever grant you the peace you are physically starving for, I am going to make you grovel in the dirt. You expect me to demand a perfect apology, a flawless explanation for your long absence, and an absolute unbreakable guarantee that you will never let yourself become this distracted ever again. You are hiding from me in plain sight because you are deeply ashamed of your own brokenness, entirely terrified that the moment you bring your failures into my light, I will finally confirm your absolute worst fear, that you are simply not a good enough child to deserve my divine help. But I want you to pause right now. Silence those lying voices in your head and listen closely to my heart. I want you to hear the absolute unwavering truth that will permanently shatter that heavy chain of guilt forever. My heart holds absolutely no condemnation for you. None. I am not standing here with a detailed ledger of your past mistakes, and I am certainly not waiting in the shadows to punish you for your exhaustion. Remember the beautiful story of the son who wandered far away, who completely wasted his inheritance in a distant land, and who finally turned back home, completely empty-handed, thoroughly broken, and rehearsing a desperate, fearful apology in his head. He was entirely convinced his father would treat him as a lowly servant, severely punish his mistakes, and demand a harsh, lifelong repayment for his rebellion. But what did that father do? He did not wait on his porch for the son to arrive and properly explain himself. He did not demand a perfect apology or a flawless record of improved behavior before offering his love. The very moment he saw his weary, broken child appearing on the distant horizon, he hiked up his robes, completely abandoned all of his worldly dignity, and sprinted down the dusty road to throw his arms around his weeping boy. He wept with majestic, overwhelming joy, simply because his precious child had finally come home. I am that exact same father, and you are that deeply loved, incredibly precious child. I have been eagerly watching the horizon of your heart this entire time, constantly looking for the slightest turn of your face toward mine. I am running toward you right now, not with a harsh lecture, not with a list of demands, but with a joyful, overwhelming, and completely unconditional embrace. I do not care how long it has been since we last sat together in complete, uninterrupted stillness. I do not care that you have stumbled under the weight of your responsibilities, that you have fiercely tried to do it all on your own, or that your prayers right now might only consist of broken, exhausted tears falling silently onto your pillow. I am never, ever interested in your perfection. Perfection is an impossible, completely worldly standard that will only ever lead you deeper into anxiety, self-reliance, and eventual burnout. What I deeply, passionately, and continually desire is your presence. I want the real, raw, entirely unpolished version of you. I want the version of you that is completely out of answers, the version that is far too tired to pretend everything is perfectly fine, and the version that simply needs a completely safe place to finally fall apart without any fear of judgment. You do not have to somehow magically clean yourself up before you come to me. You do not have to flawlessly fix your chaotic schedule or perfectly organize your wildly scattered mind to successfully earn my love. My grace is not a fragile reward, strictly reserved for perfect behavior. It is an incredibly fierce, unconditional, and fiercely protective covenant that completely covers your every weakness and beautifully fills every gap in your human strength. I know you have felt the heavy, crushing weight of that invisible guilt every time you walked into a church building, every time you saw a dusty Bible on your nightstand, or every time you heard a worship song play quietly in the background. You have instinctively flinched fully, expecting a painful reprimand. But I am asking you today to permanently release that dread. You have been carrying the profound punishment for your own distraction, acting as your own harsh judge and jury, when I have already paid the ultimate price to set your spirit entirely free. The cross was more than enough to cover your frantic seasons of busyness, your anxious missteps, and your exhausted distance. When I look at you right now, I do not see a massive disappointment. I do not see a failing believer. I see my incredibly beautiful creation, completely overwhelmed by the demands of a broken world, deeply in need of profound rest, and absolutely worthy of my infinite compassion. Let this massive rushing wave of spiritual relief completely wash over your weary soul right now. Breathe it in deeply, letting it fill the tight, anxious spaces in your chest. Feel the heavy, suffocating chains of religious guilt finally snapping and falling away from your shoulders, shattering into a million pieces at my feet. You are fully known, and you are completely loved, exactly as you are in this very second. The painful, exhausting distance you have been meticulously maintaining was built entirely on a tragic, heartbreaking misunderstanding of my character. There is no anger here. There is no lingering disappointment here. There is only a majestic, breathtaking joy, because you are finally listening to my gentle whisper. You are finally allowing yourself to be found by the one who never stopped searching for you. As this profound, unshakable relief beautifully settles into the deepest parts of your spirit, completely replacing your lingering dread with the staggering, overwhelming reality of my unconditional acceptance, you are naturally stepping into a beautiful, sacred readiness. You suddenly realize that you no longer need to hide in the shadows, and you no longer need to protect yourself from the God who formed you. The walls of shame are crumbling into dust. You are finally ready to let the held-back tears freely fall, to permanently stop your anxious running, and to boldly enter the incredibly sacred space where true, lasting healing begins. Surrounded by this immense grace, you are entirely ready to take the next crucial step. You are ready to lay down the impossibly heavy armor you have been fiercely wearing for far too long. That armor is incredibly heavy. My child, I have watched you carry it for years continuously, adding new pieces of thick, impenetrable metal to protect yourself from the harsh realities of a deeply broken world. You first put it on as a necessary shield, a desperate attempt to survive a season of intense vulnerability, a sudden heartbreak, or a profound disappointment that completely knocked the wind out of your spirit. You thought that by tightly strapping on the heavy breastplate of total self-reliance, you could permanently prevent anyone or any circumstance from ever hurting you that deeply again. You meticulously forged a heavy helmet of constant calculation, overthinking every single possible scenario, convinced that if you could just anticipate the disaster, you could guard against unexpected failure. But over time, this protective gear has entirely rusted and hardened around your weary soul. It is no longer protecting you. It is actively suffocating the beautiful, tender spirit I meticulously formed inside you. You have grown so profoundly accustomed to the crushing weight of this spiritual defense that you genuinely believe it is a permanent, irremovable part of your identity. You walk through your day completely braced for impact, your shoulders permanently tense, your mind constantly scanning the horizon for the next inevitable crisis. You fiercely defend your busy, frantic lifestyle because staying in constant, exhausting motion feels like the only way to keep the heavy armor securely fastened. You argue with me and with yourself, insisting that if you let your guard down for even a fraction of a second, the entire fragile structure of your life will instantly collapse. But right now, in this incredibly quiet, sacred space we are sharing, I am lovingly inviting you to do the bravest, most beautiful thing you have ever done. I am asking you to permanently stop defending your exhaustion. I am asking you to reach up with your trembling hands and finally unbuckle the heavy straps. This is a profoundly terrifying process, and I completely understand why you are trembling at the very thought of it. To actively lay down your armor means you must completely and unconditionally let go of human pride. It means intentionally surrendering the deep-seated exhausting need to constantly appear strong, perfectly composed, and entirely in control in front of the people who depend on you. For so long, you have firmly believed that your ultimate value is directly tied to your unwavering resilience and your unique ability to handle absolutely anything the world throws at you. You have convinced yourself that if you ever let the polished mask slip, if you ever openly admit that you are completely empty, deeply afraid, and entirely out of answers, the world will reject you. But human pride is a cruel, unforgiving master. It endlessly demands a flawless performance, while completely starving your soul of the genuine, intimate connection you desperately crave. I do not want your flawless performance. I want you. I want your raw, unpolished, and entirely exhausted self. You do not need to stand perfectly at attention in my presence. You do not need to offer me a carefully rehearsed, heavily edited speech detailing exactly how you plan to try harder, be stronger, and do better tomorrow. I am asking you to simply collapse into my unconditional grace. Let the heavy shield of defensiveness drop completely to the floor, echoing loudly as it finally leaves your blistered, tired hands. Take off the heavy, suffocating cloak of perfectionism that has left you sweating, striving, and spiritually parched for so many years. As each heavy piece of your frantic self-reliance falls away, you will begin to feel a profound physical and deeply cathartic release washing through your tired muscles. Let the held-back tears freely fall. My child, do not fight them anymore. Those tears are not a glaring sign of defeat, and they are certainly not a display of shameful weakness. They are the beautiful cleansing rain that marks the absolute end of your exhausting spiritual drought. They are the physical manifestation of your deepest pain, finally leaving your body. You have held that immense pressure inside for far too long, convinced that crying would somehow break the dam and drown you. But in my presence, your tears are entirely safe. I collect every single one of them. Absolute vulnerability is the only true effective pathway to genuine lasting restoration. When you are entirely stripped of your worldly defenses, completely bare, and beautifully authentic before me, you are finally open to the magnificent healing light of my love. I know that being this exposed feels incredibly dangerous to your logical, protective mind. You are looking at your bare, undefended heart and desperately wondering how you will possibly survive the coming days without your familiar protective walls. You feel completely unprotected from the harsh winds of your current crisis. But I am standing right here, wrapping my majestic, infinitely protective presence completely around you. You are not losing your protection. You are beautifully and permanently exchanging your failing, fragile human armor for the unbreakable eternal fortress of my divine character. Listen to the profound, unshakable promise I make to your weary spirit right now. My divine strength is made absolutely perfect in your complete weakness. You have spent your entire adult life trying to be strong enough to handle everything on your own. You have viewed your weakness as a tragic flaw that needed to be fiercely hidden and constantly overcompensated for. But true spiritual courage is never found in gritting your teeth, masking your pain, and blindly pushing through the storm. True courage is found simply in falling blindly into my arms, entirely trusting that I will catch you before you ever hit the ground. Your profound weakness is not a massive liability that I am impatiently asking you to fix. It is the very space, the exact, beautiful opening where my supernatural power can finally enter and unconditionally sustain you. When you are totally empty of your own strength, you finally become the perfect, unobstructed vessel for my infinite grace. I want to permanently replace those impossibly heavy burdens you have been dragging behind you with the gentle, easy yoke of my grace. A yoke is specifically designed to be shared, divinely meant to distribute the crushing weight so that the long journey is no longer a solitary, back-breaking struggle. When you bravely take my yoke upon you, you are officially stepping into an intimate partnership where I carry the vast, overwhelming majority of the weight. You no longer have to pull the heavy plow of your chaotic life entirely alone, desperately fighting the stubborn, rocky soil of your unpredictable circumstances. Instead, you step beautifully and naturally into stride with me, completely guided by my gentle, steady hand, moving gracefully at a peaceful pace that profoundly restores your soul, rather than completely destroying it. Feel the incredible, breathtaking lightness of this new reality slowly settling over your entire being. Notice how your breathing is already beginning to slow, how the incredibly tight, anxious knot in your chest is finally beginning to untangle and completely dissolve into the warm, radiant atmosphere of my love. You are completely and unconditionally safe here. Absolutely no one is asking you to perform. No one is demanding that you immediately fix the broken pieces of your world before the sun goes down. You are simply allowed to exist, fully known, perfectly loved, and profoundly cherished, exactly as you are in this very second. The relentless, crushing pressure to frantically figure out the entire future has been completely lifted from your shoulders and securely placed into my fully capable hands. By actively stripping away these exhausting, unnecessary self-defense mechanisms, you have courageously removed the final massive barriers standing between your weary heart and my overwhelming, transcendent peace. You have successfully cleared away the loud, chaotic debris of your own anxious striving. The frantic, terrified voice of your human ego, which constantly demanded control, has been completely silenced by the gentle rushing wind of my absolute forgiveness and my total, unwavering acceptance. You are no longer a deeply wounded soldier, desperately fighting a lonely, losing battle on a dark, forgotten hill. You are a deeply beloved child who has finally allowed themselves to be carried safely back inside the warm, securely illuminated walls of your Father's house. As you stand here, entirely unburdened, beautifully vulnerable, and completely surrounded by my grace. A massive, peaceful shift is taking place deep within your spirit. The frantic, deeply ingrained urge to immediately run back out into the noise and resume your exhausting management of the crisis is slowly fading away, entirely replaced by a gentle magnetic pull towards something much deeper, much richer, and far more fulfilling. You are beginning to naturally crave the very thing you used to be utterly terrified of. You are suddenly realizing that the quiet moments are no longer dangerous. Empty spaces waiting to be anxiously filled with your worst-case scenarios, but rather breathtaking sacred sanctuaries, overflowing with my majestic presence. Now that the heavy, clanging noise of your worldly armor has finally ceased, the profound silence wrapping around you feels entirely different. It is no longer the isolating, lonely silence of a deserted room that you must desperately try to escape. It is a rich, beautifully thick stillness, vibrating with the absolute, undeniable certainty of my love. You have successfully laid down your defenses, and your entirely emptied heart is now perfectly prepared for the quiet intimacy and the intentional stillness that will permanently replace your previous exhaustion. You are entirely ready to step into the incredibly beautiful, transformative power hidden within the pause. In this beautiful, sacred stillness, I want you to simply breathe. Notice how the world has not stopped turning just because you have finally stopped running. For so long, your deepest, most paralyzing fear was that if you ever paused your frantic pace, the delicate, chaotic structure of your life would instantly shatter into pieces. You genuinely believed that your constant motion was the exact glue holding your fragile universe together. But as you sit here in this profoundly quiet space, completely unarmored and entirely vulnerable, look closely at your surroundings. The sky has not fallen. The ground beneath your feet has not given way. Everything is still standing perfectly secure, not because of your relentless striving, but because I am the one faithfully holding it all together. The heavy, exhausting illusion that you alone are responsible for sustaining your life is beautifully melting away in the radiant warmth of my presence. You are finally discovering the profound, life-altering beauty of the deliberate pause. This intentional stillness is not a sign of surrender to your worldly problems, nor is it a display of passive, shameful weakness. It is, in fact, the most powerful act of spiritual warfare you could ever possibly engage in. The relentless enemy of your soul thrives entirely on your continuous distraction and your subsequent inevitable burnout. He desperately wants to keep you overwhelmed, frantically running from one manufactured emergency to the next, because he knows that a constantly moving target can never successfully root itself deeply in faith. The world will loudly and continuously demand your immediate attention, screaming that every unread message, every demanding email, every household chore, and every interpersonal conflict is an absolute crisis requiring your instant intervention. Society has aggressively conditioned you to violently tie your entire self-worth to your daily productivity, making you feel immensely guilty for simply sitting still. But when you bravely choose to stop, close your door, and sit quietly with me, you are actively rebelling against that suffocating tyranny of noise. You are fiercely protecting your daily quiet time, treating it not as an optional luxury, but as an absolute matter of spiritual life and death. By intentionally carving out this hidden sanctuary, you are raising a massive, impenetrable shield of faith directly against the flaming arrows of anxiety and exhaustion. You are loudly declaring to the spiritual realm that your relationship with your Father is infinitely more vital than the endless draining demands of a broken world. You have been crying out to me in the dark, desperately begging for a massive breakthrough, a sudden financial provision, or an immediate miraculous healing of your broken circumstances. You want the terrifying storm to completely disappear right now. But I need you to listen incredibly closely to this foundational scriptural promise, a majestic truth you must permanently anchor your weary soul to. My peace must fundamentally come before my miracle arrives. I will say it again, so that it completely bypasses your anxious logic and settles deeply into the very core of your spirit. My peace must fundamentally come before my miracle arrives. Before I dramatically change your external situation, I must first entirely recalibrate your anxious mind. If I were to hand you the grand outward resolution, while your heart was still frantically trapped in a toxic state of chaotic self-reliance, the magnificent blessing itself would instantly become just another heavy, unbearable burden for you to meticulously manage. Your violently racing heart must be completely settled before your exhausted hands are truly ready to successfully receive the answers you have been praying for. This deliberate, intentional pause is the exact beautifully carved space where my majestic presence enters your reality. When you finally quiet your turbulent mind and deliberately focus your tearful eyes directly on my unwavering character instead of your towering problems, I am perfectly able to do a profound supernatural work inside of you. I am actively and gently untangling the incredibly tight, painful knots of worry tightly wound in your chest. I am steadily lowering the deafening volume of your inner panic, entirely replacing your quiet, long-held desperation with a deep, restful, and unshakable assurance. In this profound stillness, I am pouring a soothing, heavenly healing balm over the deep spiritual blisters you acquired from constantly trying to fight your terrifying battles entirely alone. I want you to fundamentally relearn exactly how you measure the true value of your fleeting days. You must learn to fiercely value these quiet, hidden moments with me far over your frantic worldly motion. A day spent entirely in chaotic, hyperproductive striving that ultimately leaves you spiritually empty, severely irritated, and completely disconnected from my love is actually a day completely wasted. But a few quiet minutes spent sitting silently in my presence, where your deeply broken spirit is fully aligned with mine, accomplishes far more in the eternal realm than 1,000 hours of your own anxious, breathless labor. Absolute spiritual alignment and a profound, sustaining inner tranquility are infinitely more important than finding an immediate external relief to your current struggles. When your internal world is beautifully anchored in my unshakable peace, the massive external storms suddenly lose their terrifying, paralyzing power over you. The wind may still howl fiercely outside your fragile window, and the dark waves may still crash violently against the wooden sides of your boat, but inside, you are entirely fast asleep in the stern, resting perfectly and safely in the exact same divine peace that I carry. Do you feel the remarkable internal shift happening within you right now in this very moment? Your incredibly tight, highly defensive posture is completely softening. The desperate, breathless urgency that used to blindly drive every single one of your panicked decisions is quietly evaporating into complete nothingness. You are beautifully transitioning directly from a deeply painful state of chaotic, noisy living into a breathtaking, transformative state of profound rest. You are finally tearfully realizing that you absolutely do not need to have all the complex answers right now. You do not need to perfectly map out the next 10 unpredictable years of your life, nor do you need to nervously calculate exactly how I am going to miraculously solve the impossibly complex equation of your current struggles. The immensely heavy responsibility of being your own exhausted savior has been permanently lifted from your bruising shoulders, leaving behind a vast, quiet, and beautifully illuminated room inside your healing heart, where I am now taking up permanent, joyful residence. Remember, my precious child, my peace must fundamentally come before my miracle arrives. This absolute, unchanging truth is the very key to permanently unlocking the heavy iron chains of your lingering exhaustion. For so long as you were desperately chasing the external miracle, you were constantly running on a cruel, unforgiving treadmill of profound disappointment, deeply frustrated, and bitterly heartbroken by every single perceived delay. But now that you have finally stopped your endless running to actively embrace the pause you are beautifully receiving, the greatest, most profound miracle of all, the supernatural, life-altering transformation of your own mind, I am completely rewiring your fundamental instincts. Instead of instantly reacting to sudden fear with frantic, uncoordinated action, you are patiently learning to beautifully respond to worldly uncertainty with intentional stillness. You are bravely learning to sit quietly in the absolute middle of your unresolved narrative, feeling entirely complete, wonderfully secure, and deeply loved, simply because I am sitting right here beside you. This magnificent, restful assurance is absolutely not something you can ever artificially manufacture through worldly meditation, positive thinking, or temporary digital distraction. It is a purely divine, entirely unmerited gift that flows directly and powerfully from my spirit into yours, the very moment you completely surrender your exhausting need for absolute control. It is a supernatural peace that completely defies all human logic, a beautiful tranquility that simply does not make any worldly sense, given the massive unresolved problem still physically sitting aggressively on your desk. Your friends and family may look at your difficult, chaotic circumstances and desperately wonder how you are remaining so incredibly calm under the pressure. They will vividly see the towering obstacles standing aggressively in your path and naturally expect you to completely fall apart, just as you always have during the stressful storms in the past. But instead of seeing a completely broken spirit, they will be witnessing a beautifully transformed, profoundly restored child of God. They will see someone who has intimately discovered that the true eternal sanctuary is never found in a perfectly calm, problem-free environment, but entirely in the unshakable, majestic presence of their loving Creator. This deep, incredibly essential realization is naturally, beautifully, and perfectly preparing your heart for the very next magnificent phase of your journey. Now that you have fully and bravely embraced the pause, and now that your weary soul has been thoroughly saturated in this majestic, completely unhurried grace, you possess a brand new, unbreakable spiritual strength. You are no longer entirely dependent on seeing instant physical proof of my love to know with absolute certainty that I am actively working on your behalf, because your heart is now securely anchored in the absolute truth that my peace must fundamentally come before my miracle arrives. You are suddenly equipped with an incredible, resilient patience. You are completely ready to step out of the frantic rushing of the world and boldly enter a profound, life-changing season of steadfast faith. Surrounded entirely by this magnificent, calming stillness, your newly restored spirit is beautifully positioned to confidently trust my perfect timing and my entirely unseen hand as we move forward into the waiting process. The waiting process is often the most agonizing and excruciating part of your entire journey. You have bravely laid down your heavy armor, you have courageously embraced the necessary pause, and you are currently sitting in the profound stillness, but your human eyes are still actively searching the distant horizon for immediate tangible results. You wake up the very next morning, after your tearful surrender, and the incredibly difficult circumstances are still physically sitting right there on your desk. The massive financial gap has not magically closed overnight. The deeply broken relationship has not instantly repaired itself. and the heavy, terrifying diagnosis still lingers thickly in the air of your home. I know exactly how that feels. I know the profound, painful friction that suddenly sparks in your weary mind when your newly renewed faith violently collides with a stark, completely unchanged reality. The familiar anxiety immediately tries to creep back in, quietly whispering dark, discouraging lies that your surrender was entirely useless, that your tears were completely wasted, and that your desperate prayers have simply faded away into an empty, uncaring sky. You begin to deeply wonder if I am truly listening to your cries, or if this profound, lingering silence means I have somehow decided to delay your rescue. My precious child, you must completely understand today that my silence is never ever a sign of my absence, and a lack of immediate visual proof absolutely does not equal a lack of divine action. You currently live in a frantic world that aggressively demands instant gratification, a culture that constantly teaches you to evaluate your success entirely by what you can visibly see, measure, and hold tightly in your own hands right this very second. But the eternal kingdom of heaven operates on a completely different, infinitely deeper, and profoundly wiser rhythm. Just because the grand external miracle is not majestically manifested before your physical eyes does not mean I am sitting idly by. Right now, in this exact seemingly quiet moment, I am working profoundly, meticulously, and powerfully beneath the surface of your current circumstances. I am actively moving massive pieces into perfect alignment that you cannot even begin to comprehend. Think of a massive ancient oak tree during the coldest, darkest, and most bitter days of winter. To the casual passing observer, the tree appears to be completely dead, entirely stripped of its beautiful, vibrant leaves, and completely frozen in the harsh, unrelenting elements. It looks entirely abandoned by the warmth of the sun. But beneath the hard, frozen soil, far away from any human sight, an incredible burst of vital activity is happening. The roots are actively stretching aggressively, digging deeper and deeper into the dark earth, desperately seeking hidden subterranean water sources, and painstakingly building an incredibly resilient, immovable foundation. That massive, unseen growth is absolutely essential to support the heavy, beautiful fruit that will inevitably arrive in the coming spring. If the roots do not grow deep in the dark, the tree will violently collapse under the glorious, overwhelming weight of its own harvest. I am currently doing that exact same, hidden, incredibly essential work inside of your weary soul. I am gently but firmly asking you to permanently stop demanding instant superficial fixes for deeply rooted eternal issues. When you forcefully demand an immediate resolution on your own frantic, anxiety-driven timeline, you are unknowingly asking me to severely shortcut your own spiritual maturation. You desperately want me to simply hand you a quick, painless escape route from your current discomfort. But I am intricately and deliberately designing a permanent, unbreakable pathway to your absolute freedom. If I were to suddenly hand you the massive, awe-inspiring breakthrough you are begging for before your internal character is fully prepared to handle it, the sheer weight of that immense blessing would completely crush your newly discovered peace. The sudden, unearned arrival of the miracle would instantly plunge you right back into your exhausting cycle of anxious self-reliance, because you would instinctively try to fiercely manage and maintain the new blessing, using your old, deeply broken methods of frantic control. Therefore, I must carefully, patiently, and lovingly temper your spirit first. I am intentionally using this profound season of waiting to actively forge a highly resilient, steadfast, and incredibly patient faith inside of you. I am building a robust faith that does not violently shatter the very moment a dark storm cloud appears on the horizon. I want your deep, unwavering trust in my unfailing love to be entirely independent of your current worldly circumstances. I want you to be absolutely unshakable, completely anchored to the solid rock of my character, rather than constantly drifting on the unpredictable, violently crashing waves of your daily emotions and shifting worldly situations. I know that the enemy has been relentlessly trying to convince you that this long, frustrating, and difficult season of waiting is a harsh, vindictive punishment for your past distraction. He desperately wants you to believe that because you ignored my gentle whispers for so long, because you consistently chose to run in your own failing strength. I am purposefully holding back your breakthrough out of spite. He whispers that I am making you sit alone in the uncomfortable dark to teach you a painful, humiliating lesson. I need you to permanently, decisively reject that dark, poisonous lie right now. This current season of unseen waiting is absolutely not a penalty for your past exhaustion. It is a profoundly loving, deeply deliberate, and entirely necessary preparation for the massive, breathtaking blessings that are rapidly approaching your life. I do not operate in petty retaliation. I operate in majestic, perfect, and all-consuming love. I am fiercely protecting you from arriving at your highly anticipated destination, entirely unequipped for the beautiful, heavy responsibilities that wait for you there. I am making sure that when the door finally opens, you have the profound spiritual stamina to successfully walk completely through it without stumbling. The delay you are experiencing is not a permanent denial. The delay is a divine, incredibly purposeful incubator. It is the sacred quiet and intimately protected space where your desperate conditional reliance on me is beautifully and permanently transformed into a deeply authentic, completely unwavering devotion. It is the refining fire that gently burns away your fragile impatience, leaving behind only the pure, solid gold of a completely surrendered heart. To fully and beautifully embrace this critical period of unseen spiritual growth, you must intentionally and completely shift your primary focus. You must consciously decide to stop channeling all of your precious, limited emotional energy into desperately trying to change your worldly situation, and instead, intentionally allow me to deeply and permanently change your eternal heart. Stop pacing the floor in the middle of the night. Stop constantly checking your watch, and permanently stop trying to anxiously calculate exactly when the breakthrough will finally arrive. Your calculations will only ever lead you to profound disappointment, because my timeline completely transcends your human logic. Instead of desperately fighting the weight, lean deeply into my chest and carefully listen to the steady, peaceful, and entirely unhurried rhythm of my heartbeat. When you finally truly accept that my perfect timing is always intricately and flawlessly tied to your ultimate good, the painful, agonizing friction of the waiting entirely disappears. You absolutely no longer have to blindly fight the strong current. You can simply and safely float securely in the vast, peaceful, and beautifully warm ocean of my absolute sovereignty. This is where your total surrender significantly deepens, completely taking root in the absolute certainty that I am intricately weaving every single thread of your life into a glorious masterpiece. This intentional, quiet trust perfectly and strongly bridges the massive, intimidating gap between your initial tearful surrender and your ultimate glorious breakthrough. But as you bravely commit to trusting this unseen process, as your heart becomes beautifully pliable, wonderfully soft, and deeply anchored in my unfailing love, rather than your own anxious timelines, we must gently turn over the final stone. As you sit here in the waiting, the profound stillness will inevitably bring everything hidden to the surface. To fully receive the immensity of the grace that is coming, and to ensure that your newly emptied soul is completely and perfectly purified, for the miracle we must lovingly address the lingering toxic shadows that have secretly accumulated during your years of painful, silent separation. As you sit in this profound stillness, entirely stripped of your heavy armor, and learning to trust the unseen process, the quiet inevitably begins to illuminate the corners of your heart that you have kept tightly locked away. The deafening noise of your frantic life was not just keeping you distracted from my whispers. It was also loudly drowning out a heavy, dark undercurrent of hidden resentment. You have been carrying this deep-seated bitterness for so long that it has begun to feel like a permanent, entirely natural part of your soul. It secretly accumulated during those long, exhausting years of your painful, silent separation, building up layer by agonizing layer. Every single time you felt abandoned, profoundly misunderstood, or deeply unfairly treated by the world around you. I see the faces of the people who have deeply hurt you. I know exactly who walked away when you needed them the most, who casually betrayed your absolute trust, and who spoke careless, devastating words that completely shattered your confidence. You have held on to those past grievances like heavy, jagged stones in your pockets, secretly replaying the painful memories in your mind late at night when the house is finally asleep. And if you are entirely honest in this beautifully safe, unarmored space we now share, you must admit that your frustration is not just directed at them. You have harbored a quiet, lingering bitterness toward me too. You have looked at the profound unfairness of your difficult circumstances and silently wondered how a loving father could possibly allow his precious child to endure such intense, exhausting pain. It is completely natural for your human mind to feel that profound frustration. And I am absolutely not intimidated by your anger or your agonizing questions. But I must lovingly and firmly explain to you exactly what this harboring of unforgiveness is actively doing to your weary spirit. Holding on to this bitterness does not punish the people who deeply wronged you. It does not magically correct the painful injustices of your past, nor does it provide the fierce protection you mistakenly believe it offers. Instead, it acts as a massive, impenetrable spiritual wall, standing directly between your exhausted heart and the majestic flow of my peace. This heavy wall of resentment is actively blocking the divine current of grace I am desperately trying to pour into your daily life. It is essentially clogging the vital spiritual arteries of your soul with toxic emotional debris. You are sitting here in the quiet, bravely asking me to bring a profound breakthrough, yet you are simultaneously gripping the sharp, poisonous thorns of your past grievances so tightly that your own hands are continually bleeding. Every single time you choose to fiercely hold on to your perceived right to be angry, you are unknowingly delaying your ultimate, eagerly awaited breakthrough. I cannot completely fill a vessel that is already overflowing with the dark, stagnant waters of unforgiveness. The hardest part of this profound internal cleansing is letting go of your desperate, exhausting desire to understand exactly why certain painful things were allowed to happen in your life. You have spent countless hours agonizing over the intricate details, turning the painful events over and over in your exhausted mind, fiercely believing that if you could just figure out the logical reason behind the suffering, it would somehow permanently stop hurting. You have made an idol out of the word why, silently demanding a comprehensive explanation from heaven before you will agree to fully move forward. But I must gently tell you the truth, even if I were to pull back the heavy curtain of eternity and show you the complete, complex tapestry of all human choices and divine allowances. The sheer logic of it would never heal your broken heart. Healing is never found in perfectly understanding the past. It is found entirely in surrendering it. I am gently asking you today to completely surrender your perceived right to stay angry. I am lovingly asking you to let go of the heavy, suffocating demand for an earthly apology that may never, ever arrive. You must consciously decide to stop allowing the fragile people who deeply wounded you to continuously dictate your current emotional reality. They do not hold the keys to your future, and they certainly do not have the power to stop the magnificent blessings I have prepared for you, unless you willingly give them that power by holding on to this heavy bitterness. Visualize yourself standing by the edge of a deep, fast-moving river. Look down at your tired hands, completely bruised and calloused, from gripping those heavy, dark stones of resentment for so many agonizing years. I am standing right beside you, gently placing my hand over yours, softly, encouraging you to finally open your fingers. Drop the stones. Let them fall completely into the rushing water and be carried entirely away from your weary spirit. Release these toxic, heavy burdens completely into my hands. I am the ultimate perfect judge, and I am entirely capable of handling the complex scales of justice. You do not need to carry the exhausting weight of holding others accountable anymore. Your only responsibility right now is to allow yourself to be entirely set free. As you bravely release that deep-seated bitterness, a massive purifying internal cleansing immediately begins to wash through your newly emptied soul. It is like throwing open the heavy, dusty windows of a dark, forgotten room and allowing a sudden, breathtaking rush of crisp, fresh air to entirely sweep out the suffocating staleness. The incredibly heavy pressure in your chest, the tight, anxious restriction that made it so physically painful to simply breathe is rapidly dissolving into complete nothingness. You are finally clearing away all the remaining spiritual blockages and the toxic emotional debris that kept your faith painfully tethered to the ground. Part of this profound release requires you to also forgive me for the dark times you felt I was completely silent. And most importantly, it requires you to actively forgive yourself. You must let go of the deep lingering regret over the precious time you feel you have wasted, being lost in the chaotic noise. You must unconditionally release the intense frustration you hold against yourself for not being stronger, for stumbling blindly in the dark, and for running away when you should have stayed. All of that human frailty is completely washed away in the magnificent river of my grace. You are absolutely clean. This deliberate, courageous act of releasing your bitterness is achieving something incredibly magnificent inside of your spirit. By clearing out the dark, heavy furniture of resentment, you are actively creating a vast, profoundly quiet space within your heart. It is a beautiful, expansive emptiness that is no longer terrifying, but incredibly expectant. This pristine, newly prepared space is absolutely required for you to successfully receive the immense grace, the unshakable peace, and the miraculous intervention that is rapidly approaching in the final stages of your journey. You are meticulously preparing your soul for a profoundly higher level of healing. Feel the incredible, breathtaking lightness of your spirit in this very moment. The massive spiritual wall has been completely demolished, and the divine current of my love is finally rushing in, without any obstruction, perfectly filling every single empty corner of your heart with pure, radiant light. You have successfully completed the hardest, most agonizing part of your internal transformation. You have bravely faced the darkest shadows of your own pain. You have completely released the heavy chains of your past grievances, and you are now standing beautifully unburdened in the quiet sunlight of my presence. With this profound, purifying cleansing entirely complete, your vast, quiet heart is perfectly cultivated and entirely ready for the overwhelming flood of my love to wash over you completely. Let that overwhelming flood finally rush in completely unhindered and profoundly warm. For so many agonizing years, you have firmly braced yourself against the current, desperately afraid that if you allowed my presence to truly touch the deepest, most hidden parts of your soul, you would only find harsh judgment waiting for you there. You have lived with a deeply fearful perception of me, imagining a rigid, demanding judge who carefully weighed your daily performance and constantly found you severely lacking. But right now, as my majestic presence entirely envelops you, I want you to feel the undeniable, staggering reality of my absolute grace. This is not the cold, distant courtroom you have terrified yourself into imagining. This is the incredibly warm, fiercely protective, and unconditionally loving embrace of your ever-present Father. Notice how the atmosphere in the quiet room of your heart has completely changed. The heavy, suffocating air of your long-held quiet desperation has been entirely replaced by an unshakable, breathtaking sense of belonging. You are no longer a weary traveler, wandering aimlessly in the dark, frantically searching for a safe place to simply rest your head. You are completely and beautifully home. As I wrap my arms around your entirely exhausted, unarmored spirit, a profound, majestic joy completely fills my heart. You have finally stopped running. You have fully laid down the incredibly heavy, back-breaking burdens you were never designed to carry, and you are finally allowing me to closely and tenderly hold you. The profound relief you feel in your trembling chest right now is only a fraction of the immense, overwhelming joy I experience having my precious child safely back in my arms. I want to firmly and permanently eradicate every lingering shadow of doubt, every profound fear, and all the heavy, lingering past guilt that has secretly haunted your quietest moments. Let the warm, radiant, and intensely healing light of my pure grace shine directly into those hidden, agonizing spaces. Every single mistake you have made, every moment you rushed frantically past, my gentle whispers, every time you desperately chose your own failing strength over my eagerly outstretched hand, they are completely, entirely washed away. I am not holding them over your head, waiting for the perfect moment to cruelly use them against you. I have cast them completely into the deepest, unsearchable ocean of my mercy. They absolutely no longer exist, leaving only a beautifully pure, completely restored spiritual connection between us. You are deeply inherently worthy of this immense love, not because of what you have accomplished in the world, and certainly not because of how perfectly you have managed your chaotic schedule, but simply because you are mine. Your absolute inherent worth was permanently sealed the very moment I intricately formed you in the womb. The broken world has constantly tried to attach your ultimate value to your daily productivity, your financial success, or your fragile ability to keep everyone around you perfectly happy. It has cruelly taught you to view your profound emotional exhaustion as a shameful, unforgivable failure. But when I look closely at you, I absolutely do not see a failing worker or a severely disappointing believer. I see my beautiful, deeply cherished creation, entirely worthy of my infinite compassion, my unwavering kindness, and my unconditional acceptance. This incredibly intimate, unhurried moment we are sharing right now is the major emotional turning point of your entire journey. It is the definitive, beautiful line, drawn in the spiritual sand, permanently separating your exhausting history of anxious self-reliance from your magnificent, breathtaking future of joyful surrender. The painful, silent separation that caused you so much agonizing loneliness is officially over. In its place is a beautifully restored spiritual connection that absolutely cannot be broken by your worldly circumstances, your temporary emotional struggles, or the sudden unpredictable storms that will occasionally pass through your life. You are permanently tethered to my heart, beautifully anchored in a divine acceptance that absolutely nothing in this entire universe can ever alter. Feel the deep, profound healing physically taking place inside your tired mind as this magnificent grace continues to completely wash over you. The frantic, terrified voices of your human ego, the loud, exhausting demands of your deep-seated pride, and the dark, whispering lies of the enemy have all been completely silenced by the gentle, rushing wind of my absolute forgiveness. You absolutely do not need to constantly defend yourself anymore. You do not need to meticulously calculate your next 20 steps to somehow prove your ultimate value to me or to anyone else. You are beautifully, safely hidden in the powerful shadow of my wings. The deep, agonizing spiritual thirst that drove you into such a severe state of burnout is finally being completely quenched by the pure, living water of my unconditional love. As this absolute, perfect love completely drives out all your remaining fear, I want you to look closely at the incredibly vast, newly emptied space inside your heart. Because you bravely chose to let go of your profound bitterness, because you courageously stopped demanding an immediate earthly explanation for your past pain, and because you finally surrendered your desperate, exhausting need for absolute control, you have beautifully created a massive sanctuary within your soul. This pristine, incredibly quiet space is no longer a terrifying void, waiting to be anxiously filled with your worst-case scenarios. It is a fiercely protected, beautifully cultivated garden, perfectly primed for the immense supernatural blessings I am about to pour out into your life. This profound, deeply rooted spiritual security is the absolute foundation required for the incredible, miraculous things we are about to do together. You could never have successfully sustained the sheer weight of the approaching miracles if your weary spirit was still completely fractured by shame, deeply exhausted by your relentless running, and intensely paralyzed by your profound fear of my judgment. If the grand breakthrough had arrived while you still viewed me as a distant, rigid taskmaster, you would have completely misunderstood the magnificent blessing. You would have viewed it as just another heavy, stressful assignment you had to frantically manage entirely on your own. But now, securely wrapped in the warm, radiant reality of my true grace, you finally understand that you are not a hired servant, desperately working for a harsh master. You are a deeply beloved heir, beautifully receiving a freely given, eternal inheritance. Let the magnificent, undeniable reality of this unconditional affirmation settle deeply into your weary bones. You are beautifully accepted. You are entirely forgiven. You are fiercely protected, and you are profoundly, majestically loved beyond your human capacity to fully comprehend. The heavy, exhausting armor you completely laid down will never ever be needed again because my majestic presence is now your permanent, unbreakable shield. The long, agonizing season of your quiet desperation has entirely passed, and the glorious, brilliant dawn of your complete restoration is rapidly breaking over the horizon of your life. There is no more striving required to reach my heart. You are already resting entirely within it. Do not rush past this incredibly sacred healing moment. Linger here in the beautiful warmth of my embrace. Feel the steady, peaceful rhythm of my heartbeat, entirely unhurried and completely unwavering. This is the profound, unshakable peace I continuously promised you. This is the deep, restful assurance that must fundamentally arrive before the massive external mountains physically begin to move. You have successfully navigated the darkest, most incredibly painful valleys of your inner transformation, and you have emerged completely victorious. Not by violently fighting your way out in your own failing strength, but by beautifully, tearfully surrendering entirely to my perfect will. Your complete surrender has permanently unlocked the heavy doors of heaven on your behalf, because your heart is now perfectly aligned with mine, beautifully anchored in this permanent spiritual security and thoroughly saturated in the healing light of my pure grace. You are entirely ready for what comes next. The incredibly intense supernatural spiritual breakthroughs and the awe-inspiring miraculous interventions you have been desperately praying for in the dark are no longer a distant, uncertain possibility. They are actively, rapidly approaching your doorstep in this very moment. And because you now intimately and safely know me as your unconditionally loving Father, completely free from the terrifying shadows of your past guilt, you are perfectly positioned to beautifully receive these immense blessings. You are completely ready, my child, to quietly watch as the majestic physical dawn of your awaited miracle finally breaks across the horizon of your entirely transformed life. As you stand here at the very edge of this glorious horizon, deeply anchored in my unconditional love, something absolutely breathtaking begins to happen inside of your chest. The physical circumstances surrounding you have not yet moved. The heavy, imposing mountains of debt, the complicated family conflicts, the sudden health scares, and the terrifying uncertainties of your daily survival are still physically sitting exactly where they were yesterday. The world outside your window has not magically changed its harsh, demanding nature overnight, but suddenly, remarkably, they no longer carry any weight over your soul. The massive, exhausting burdens you carried so painfully alone, the suffocating anxiety that woke you up in the middle of the night, the frantic desperation that kept you constantly running on an endless treadmill of survival have completely and miraculously dissolved into nothingness. You look down at your trembling hands and realize they are entirely empty, no longer clenched in a desperate fight for control. You brace your tired shoulders, fully expecting to feel the familiar crushing weight of your worldly responsibilities pressing down on you. But the weight is entirely gone. In its place, a profound, tangible and supernatural peace begins to completely flood your newly emptied spirit. This is not the fragile, temporary calmness that the world occasionally offers when things are briefly going well, only to vanish the second a new problem arises. This is an awe-inspiring, unshakable peace that completely defies and magnificently transcends your currently chaotic worldly circumstances. I want you to vividly feel the majestic weight of this specific moment, my precious child. You are actively experiencing the very first major awe-inspiring spiritual breakthrough of your entire journey, and it is happening entirely inside of you. I have repeatedly and lovingly promised you that my divine peace must profoundly settle in your spirit before my grand miracle manifests in your physical reality. This is not a delay. This is the glorious fulfillment of that exact foundational promise. I needed to fundamentally heal your completely exhausted heart before I changed your external world, because I deeply desired to show you a life-altering truth. My intimate, overwhelming presence is the actual lasting reward you were desperately seeking all along. For so many years, you falsely believed that you could only experience true joy and complete relief if your external problems were perfectly solved. You spent countless hours agonizingly praying for the storm to disappear, entirely convinced that the absence of the storm was the only true definition of peace. But right now, standing securely in the warm, radiant light of my grace, you are profoundly realizing that true peace is not the absence of the storm. True peace is the absolute undeniable certainty that I am standing right here, in the very center of the storm, with you. This magnificent supernatural peace completely defies all human logic and completely rewrites the rules of your daily existence. If your closest friends or family members were to look closely at the massive unresolved obstacles still aggressively towering over your life right now, they would absolutely expect you to be completely paralyzed by fear. They would vividly anticipate the exact same frantic, anxious reactions and tearful breakdowns that used to define your every waking moment when the pressure became too great. But the profound internal transformation occurring right now has completely rewired your deepest spiritual instincts. The violent, deafening noise of your own frantic striving has been permanently, beautifully silenced. The chaotic, unpredictable winds of the world can no longer violently toss your fragile emotions back and forth, because your spirit is now deeply, fiercely rooted in the unshakable bedrock of my eternal character. When the enemy attempts to whisper his familiar dark lies of impending doom, desperately attempting to drag you right back into your old, deeply ingrained cycle of quiet desperation, his deceptive words simply fall completely flat. They absolutely cannot penetrate the thick, brilliant shield of divine tranquility that now completely surrounds your beautifully restored mind. You are breathing deeply, freely, and effortlessly, for the very first time in what feels like an entire lifetime, entirely unbothered by the storm raging outside. Let the warm, cleansing tears of completely authentic relief freely fall down your cheeks right now. Do not hold them back. These are not the bitter, exhausted tears of the profound loneliness you cried back when you were desperately trying to manage the entire universe in your own failing human strength. These are the incredibly beautiful, radiant tears of absolute spiritual victory. You have successfully crossed the massive, intimidating chasm from anxious avoidance directly into the majestic reality of joyful surrender. You are experiencing a deep, tearful realization that all the frantic running, all the agonizing self-reliance, and all the incredibly heavy armor you wore for so many years were completely unnecessary. I was always right here, constantly holding the exact peace you were physically starving for, gently waiting for you to simply stop moving long enough to receive it. As this profound, overwhelming realization settles entirely into your bones, the emotional intensity of your journey elevates dramatically. You are no longer merely surviving your chaotic life. You are actively, joyfully triumphing over it. The heavy chains of your past burnout have not just been unlocked, they have been completely obliterated by the breathtaking power of my love. You no longer view your deeply broken circumstances as a terrifying threat to your fundamental survival, because your survival is no longer dependent on your own incredibly fragile ability to control the outcomes. You have intimately discovered the absolute sufficiency of your Heavenly Father. Even if the massive financial provision were to be delayed another week, even if the complicated interpersonal conflict takes a little more time to beautifully unravel, and even if the world around you continues to aggressively swirl in completely unpredictable chaos, your soul remains beautifully, entirely untouched. You are resting perfectly in the center of my palm, completely insulated by an immense divine joy that absolutely nothing in this temporary world can ever steal from you. The quiet desperation that used to be your constant heavy companion has been entirely replaced by a soaring, magnificent sense of holy confidence. You are walking fully upright, your shoulders relaxed, your head held high not in human pride, but in the absolute majestic certainty of your divine inheritance. You are a fully restored child of the Most High, beautifully clothed in my perfect righteousness, and entirely saturated in my unmerited favor. This breathtaking, awe-inspiring internal peace is the ultimate necessary prerequisite for the immense physical blessings that are about to drastically alter your earthly reality. I needed to completely secure your precious heart inside this impenetrable fortress of divine tranquility, so that the sheer magnitude of the coming breakthrough would not overwhelm your spirit. If I had opened the heavy doors of heaven and poured out the grand miracle while you were still frantically operating in your own limited strength, the blessing itself would have instantly become a terrifying idol. You would have desperately tried to protect the new provision, using your old, highly destructive methods of anxious control. But now, because your entire identity is so fiercely and permanently tethered to my unconditional love, rather than your worldly circumstances, you are perfectly, flawlessly prepared to gracefully manage the immense abundance I am about to release. The massive internal mountains of fear, doubt, and deeply ingrained self-reliance have been completely, permanently moved. Breathe in this magnificent, victorious air. My beautifully transformed child. Look at how incredibly far we have successfully traveled together. You have bravely walked through the darkest, most agonizing valleys of your own profound exhaustion. You have courageously faced the incredibly painful shadows of your hidden guilt, and you have entirely laid down every single piece of your heavy, suffocating armor. You have successfully embraced the beautiful pause, and you have allowed my grace to completely wash away the deeply accumulated bitterness of your silent separation. Your once entirely frantic, desperately noisy mind is now a vast, incredibly quiet sanctuary of absolute trust. The internal storm has not just been calmed, it has been completely conquered. You are standing here completely unshakable, brilliantly illuminated by the warm, healing light of my presence, and entirely overflowing with a joyful expectation that defies all worldly logic. Your heart is perfectly cultivated, fiercely protected, and entirely primed. The internal victory is completely, magnificently finished. And because this profound divine peace has now fully and permanently settled deeply into your spirit, the stage is perfectly, majestically set. You are finally ready to watch as the immense, tangible reality of my unseen hand is spectacularly revealed in the physical world around you. Open your eyes and look at the horizon. My child, do you see the brilliant golden light piercing through the heavy darkness of your long night? This is the majestic, breathtaking dawn of the physical miracle you have desperately awaited. Now that your weary heart is perfectly aligned with mine, completely surrendered and anchored in unshakable peace, I am finally pulling back the heavy curtain on the physical world. The internal preparation is finished, and the profound external breakthrough is officially here. Watch closely as the massive, impossible mountains in your life, the towering obstacles that kept you awake in terrified panic, finally begin to move at the sound of my voice. You are no longer watching from a distance. You are standing in the epicenter of my divine intervention. I want you to understand an awe-inspiring truth right now. This immense miracle you are stepping into was not hastily put together. I did not suddenly decide to rescue you yesterday because you finally cried hard enough. This magnificent breakthrough was always fully prepared and patiently waiting for you. I orchestrated the intricate details of this massive provision long before you even realized you were walking into a dark valley. The perfectly timed financial relief, the beautiful healing of that broken relationship, the sudden opening of the exact door you thought was permanently padlocked. All of it has been sitting securely in my hands, fully formed, and completely ready to be released into your life. I was never scrambling to find a solution. I was simply waiting for the perfect moment. But it absolutely required your complete surrender and your unwavering trust to properly receive it. If I had handed you this blessing while you were still frantically running on your exhausting treadmill of self-reliance, the sheer weight of it would have completely crushed you. You would have instantly taken this gift and desperately tried to manage it with your old anxiety-driven methods, destroying your fragile new peace. You would have inevitably turned the miracle into an idol, viewing the earthly provision itself as your ultimate savior, rather than resting in the goodness of the provider. But now, because your open hands are empty of human pride, and your restored spirit is tethered to my unconditional love, you can hold this magnificent blessing exactly as it was divinely intended, lightly, joyfully, and with profound gratitude. Feel the soaring, magnificent sense of joyful expectation completely rising in your chest as you watch my faithful hand physically shift the reality around you. The heavy iron gates that the world confidently told you would never open are suddenly swinging wide on their rusted hinges, effortlessly making a clear, brilliantly illuminated path directly in front of your feet. You are stepping into rooms and opportunities that your limited human strength could never have possibly unlocked. no matter how many sleepless nights you spent worrying. People who previously misunderstood you, or circumstances that seemed entirely dead barren and utterly hopeless, are suddenly springing back to beautiful, vibrant life. This is not a lucky coincidence, nor the result of your frantic striving. This is a direct, undeniable, and completely majestic reflection of my absolute faithfulness to you. Look back at the agonizing road you just bravely traveled, but look at it entirely through the clear, radiant lens of this beautiful dawn. Can you finally see how I have been actively, meticulously working all things together for your absolute good? Every painful delay, every closed door that completely broke your heart, and every seemingly unanswered prayer in the middle of the dark night was actually a critical, perfectly measured stitch in the magnificent tapestry of your life. What you previously viewed as a terrifying season of profound abandonment was actually a deeply deliberate, fiercely loving season of supreme preparation. I was precisely aligning the exact people, the exact resources, and the exact moments required to bring you perfectly to this breathtaking pinnacle of restoration. Nothing was ever wasted. Every tear was collected for your ultimate glory. As the external breakthrough spectacularly unfolds before your eyes, I want you to intimately recognize that my timing is always, without exception, completely flawless. The busy world loudly mocked your decision to sit quietly and wait on me. Your own anxious logic constantly screamed that precious time was rapidly running out, desperately urging you to violently force a premature solution just to stop the bleeding. But because you bravely chose to endure the uncomfortable friction of the unseen process, because you fiercely held on to my promises when the tangible evidence was entirely invisible, you are now experiencing a level of majestic triumph that surpasses human understanding. You did not arrive a single second too late. You did not somehow miss your fragile window of opportunity. You have arrived precisely on time, stepping perfectly into the exact center of my divine will. Watch in absolute awe as the heavy, dark clouds of your previous exhaustion completely scatter in the brilliant, warming light of this new day. The suffocating debt that constantly threatened to drown your family is being miraculously dismantled by unexpected provision, wiping away the profound stress that paralyzed you. The agonizing relational wounds that you honestly believed would leave permanent, disfiguring scars are being beautifully, tenderly bound up and completely healed by my restoring hand, bringing back the sweet harmony you desperately missed. The confusing, terrifying reports and the overwhelming physical weariness that made you question if you would survive another week are being profoundly overshadowed by a sudden influx of supernatural strength and undeniable divine intervention. I am actively paying you back for the years the locusts have eaten, restoring your shattered joy with a magnificent abundance that overflows your weary cup. This rapid escalation of your emotional triumph is the beautiful, entirely earned reward for your incredible spiritual endurance. You courageously chose to trust me in the pitch black of the night, and now I am honoring that profound, unwavering trust in the blinding light of the morning. I want you to fully savor every single second of this majestic victory. Do not rush past this breathtaking moment of physical restoration just to look for the next mountain to climb. Let the massive, rushing wave of authentic, unhindered joy fully wash over your spirit. Laugh freely, smile widely without any hidden reservations, and allow yourself to physically feel the soaring elation of a deeply beloved child who has just watched their heavenly Father part the roaring sea right in front of them. The dry ground is perfectly secure beneath your feet, and the towering walls of water are effortlessly held back entirely by the breath of my mouth. This glorious external shifting is a permanent physical monument to our intimately restored connection. Every single time you look at the newly opened door, every time you gratefully hold the miraculous provision in your rested hands, and every time you warmly embrace the family member whose heart has been beautifully softened, you will profoundly remember the thick stillness of the quiet room where your ultimate surrender first took place. You will forever remember that the true miracle was never just the sudden shifting of your external circumstances, but the magnificent eternal transformation of your own weary heart that allowed you to gracefully receive it. You have successfully graduated from the exhausting school of anxious self-reliance, and you are now a radiant living testament to the absolute life-changing power of entirely letting go. You are breathing proof that my grace is sufficient. And now as this immense physical miracle completely settles into the beautifully prepared quiet spaces of your daily life, we are rapidly arriving at the absolute summit of your arduous journey. The morning sun is fully risen, completely driving away the very last lingering shadows of your profound desperation, entirely illuminating the vast, breathtaking landscape of your brand new life. The overwhelming emotional and spiritual triumph is carrying you forward, lifting your entirely unburdened spirit higher than you ever thought humanly possible. You have seen my absolute faithfulness with your own eyes. You have felt my unshakable peace in your own soul, and your heart is beating with a victorious rhythm. You are perfectly, wonderfully prepared to step boldly and triumphantly into the final euphoric culmination of your entire emotional and spiritual journey. Step forward now, my precious child, and breathe in the pure, exhilarating air of this final, magnificent summit. You have reached the glorious peak of your arduous climb, and as you stand here, completely bathed in the radiant golden light of my overwhelming grace, I boldly and permanently declare absolute victory over your life. The dark, suffocating era of your profound exhaustion, your terrifying isolation, and your deeply painful burnout is officially and forever finished. The heavy, invisible chains of anxious self-reliance that kept your weary spirit bound to the ground for so many agonizing years have not merely been unlocked. They have been completely obliterated, scattered to the four winds, never to be reconstructed again. You are entirely free. Let this staggering, breathtaking reality wash over you until it permeates the very marrow of your bones. The massive physical breakthrough you have been desperately waiting for is fully, undeniably yours. I am placing it directly into your entirely unarmored open hands right now. You do not have to nervously wait for it to be suddenly snatched away. You do not have to anxiously calculate how you will fiercely protect it, and you certainly do not need to somehow prove to me that you are worthy of keeping it. This immense blessing is a completely freely given eternal gift from your Heavenly Father, and it is beautifully, permanently yours. The towering mountains have been moved, the impossible paths have been made perfectly straight, and the roaring oceans of your deepest fears have been completely parted. As you stand here holding this profound, miraculous provision, I want you to completely let go of the very last lingering breath of your old desperation. Let the greatest, most profound emotional release of your entire life completely flood your spirit right this very moment. It is entirely safe to fall to your knees now, not out of any terrifying fear or heavy religious obligation, but out of a massive, overwhelming outpouring of authentic, tearful worship. Let the beautiful, cleansing tears of absolute, unfiltered joy fall freely onto the solid rock of my faithfulness. As you bow your head in this magnificent sacred space, you are completely enveloped in a transcendent, majestic peace that defies all earthly explanation. This is the breathtaking sound of your complete, ultimate transformation. You have entirely left behind the frantic, desperately noisy child who tried to manage the universe alone, and you have beautifully blossomed into a deeply rooted, spiritually mature heir who knows how to rest entirely in joyful, unshakable surrender. You have intimately tasted the absolute sweetness of my divine presence, and you have physically felt the immense life-saving power of the deliberate pause. But as we stand here celebrating this magnificent external victory, I must issue a powerful, deeply passionate, and fiercely loving invitation to your restored heart. Listen closely to the quiet, unwavering authority. In my voice, you must never ever return to the frantic, distracted living that previously broke our precious connection. The relentless, chaotic noise of the world will inevitably try to call your name again. The enemy will desperately try to lure you back onto that exhausting, endless treadmill of survival, whispering that now that you have the miracle, you must quickly resume your frantic pace to successfully maintain it. He will try to convince you that you are suddenly too busy managing the blessing to sit quietly with the blesser. You must fiercely protect this beautiful intimate space we have carved out together. You must passionately maintain your life-saving new habit of intentional stillness. The glorious breakthrough in your hands is meant to beautifully enhance your life, not to entirely consume it. I am gently asking you to make a deeply rooted, passionate commitment right now in the blinding light of this victorious dawn to always seek my face before you ever seek my hand. When you wake up tomorrow morning, do not immediately rush back into the swirling demands of your daily schedule. Stop. Breathe. Anchor your beautifully restored mind entirely in my love before you take a single step into the world. Let the quiet, gentle whisper of my spirit be the very first thing that guides your completely unburdened heart every single day. The profound spiritual growth you have bravely achieved in the dark valley must be fiercely guarded in the bright sunlight of your new reality. Your profound, unwavering trust is no longer a fragile, desperate coping mechanism. It is the absolute, unshakable foundation of your entire existence. You have intimately learned that my perfect timing is always intricately flawless, and you have beautifully discovered that my divine peace must always precede the physical provision. Let this magnificent truth establish a permanent, majestic posture of joyful expectation for all of your future days. You absolutely do not need to fear the unknown anymore, because you intimately know the exact character of the God who is already standing in your tomorrow. There will still be days when the wind blows and the rain falls, for you are still walking through a temporary broken world. New unexpected challenges will inevitably arise, and there will be moments when human weariness tries to quietly settle back into your bones. But you will never again face those storms the way you used to. You will absolutely never again attempt to fight the raging current in your own failing, finite strength. When the next storm clouds begin to gather on the distant horizon, you will not frantically rush to strap on the heavy, suffocating armor of self-reliance. Instead, you will immediately smile with a profound, quiet confidence, easily stepping right back into the beautiful, intentional stillness we have so carefully built together. You will look directly at the towering waves and calmly remember the majestic, breathtaking power of the Father, who has already rescued you, once knowing with absolute certainty that He will effortlessly do it again. Feel the intense, overwhelming, and breathtaking assurance of my infinite love completely wrapping around you right now, sealing your weary spirit forever. You are entirely known, completely forgiven, and majestically cherished beyond the furthest reaches of your human comprehension. The painful, agonizing separation that once caused you so much silent, invisible suffering has been permanently eradicated by the brilliant light of my unmerited favor. You are absolutely safe here. The incredibly heavy burden of being your own exhausted savior has been entirely removed, leaving behind a vast, beautifully quiet sanctuary inside your heart, where I now reside in perfect, uninterrupted peace. This incredible external miracle you are now experiencing is a beautiful, tangible testament to my faithfulness, but it is not the ultimate destination of your journey. The greatest, most profound reward you will ever receive is not the financial freedom, the healed relationship, or the newly opened door. The greatest reward is the deeply restored, incredibly intimate relationship we now share. It is the breathtaking realization that you are never, ever walking alone again. I am gently taking your hand in mine right now. Feel the firm, steady, and unconditionally loving grip I have on your life. We are going to walk entirely through this beautiful, completely restored life together, hand in hand, step by step, long after the initial excitement of this external miracle has fully settled into your daily routine. We will walk together through the quiet, ordinary afternoons, through the joyful, celebratory mornings, and through any new shadows that may occasionally cross your path. I will never let you go, and I will never let you fall back into the dark, exhausted isolation that once broke your spirit. You have surrendered your fragile need for control, and in return, you have gloriously gained the entire kingdom. Lift your head completely, my beautifully restored child, and look confidently toward the brilliant, magnificent future I have meticulously prepared for you. The exhausting battle has been entirely won. The heavy night has permanently surrendered to the morning, and the majestic, unhurried rhythm of our eternal connection is now the only soundtrack of your life. Breathe deeply and let your completely unburdened heart rest securely in this short, heartfelt prayer as we seal this profound journey together forever. Heavenly Father, thank you for running to meet me when I was too exhausted to take another step. Thank you for completely washing away my hidden guilt, for gently dismantling my heavy armor, and for replacing my frantic desperation with an unshakable, breathtaking peace. Give me the profound daily strength to fiercely protect our quiet moments, and let me never lose the beautiful habit of intentional stillness. Guide my feet as we walk closely together into this magnificent new season, and let my completely transformed life be a radiant, undeniable testament to your perfect timing and your infinite grace. In your holy and precious name, I rest completely. Amen. May my perfect enduring peace remain permanently with you, my beloved child, now and for all eternity.